Hello everyone and welcome back to another TCAP video. In today's Gift Unto Your Eyes we'll be going over the reasons that TCAP ended. Well, I'll be going over it. You'll just be sitting there looking incredibly sexy. Most people believe that the show ended because Lewis Conrad topped himself, but that's not the entire truth. Yes, it contributed and certainly put pressure on Dateline NBC to cancel the show or significantly change it, but the truth is, there were many reasons why TCAP was eventually left alive with Conrad. Notice, however, that the list won't include that they were getting too close to predators in government. My solicitors have made it very clear that I should read the following statement. The idea that there are predators in government is laughable. Very few high-ranking officials have been accused of any type of sex offences, let alone those against children. If that were to happen though, we all know that anybody with information would be treated well and kept safe. Without further ado, and before I shoot myself in the back of the head 18 times, let's get into the reasons why To Catch a Predator was cancelled. Chris Hansen has stated multiple times that both he and Dateline NBC had sort of decided that the show had run its course. When he spoke to DJ Vlad, he made it known that he was ready to do some new stuff, even though the show was iconic.
I mean, were you upset when the show was ultimately canceled?
I thought we could go do more. I was ready to do some other topics at the time. There were a lot of other things I want to do. I'm known for this, but it's still 2, 3, 4, 5% of my portfolio in reporting.
Part of this reasoning was that the show being iconic meant that it was always going to be relevant, and it is very clear that that was the case.
And what NBC figured out is that they had a lot of material that could be repackaged, repurposed, and re-aired for many years to come.
Not only does this show have a thriving online community that lives to this day, but also the show is still being occasionally aired to this day. And they even did a reboot, which I made a video on, which you can check out. But for a show with only 10 investigations, that is some amazing staying power. In a way, it makes sense. If you have a show that will always be relevant and always make money, why waste money making more? But on the other hand, it does seem like it would be disincentivizing for people to make a good show if every time they make one, the network goes, sorry, this is too good. We're cancelling it so we can just air reruns whilst this horrendous piece of garbage gets renewed for a 57th season. However, the evergreen content was not the only reason that the show was cancelled. Nope. Still feels stupid to say out loud. The show was notoriously very expensive to film.
The production became very expensive.
They weren't luring these predators to a studio, you dumb bitch. They had to get them to a house where people sleep, wake up, poop, get out of bed, in that order. Lighting equipment, sound equipment, storage for all of the horrifying nightmare fuel the predators would bring that would eventually be used as evidence, and a pig pen for all of the arresting officers. This in combination with the timeless content meant that Dateline NBC didn't really want to do another one as they were incredibly tight. As you can tell, I'm not obsessed about the fact that this show no longer airs. I am truly at peace with it. Having said that, there are a whole group of people that will have been ecstatic when the show ended because they never liked its existence in the first place. To Catch a Predator and especially Perverted Justice were constantly in controversy during the course of the show, and that did bleed through into the network. One such example would be the creator of Black Mirror, Charlie Brooker, who wrote an unhinged article for The Guardian criticising TCAP, claiming it made you feel sorry for potential child rapists. Personally, I find the article disagreeable, but overall fine for a long stretch until the cocaine kicked in and you read the final paragraph. He also did a piece for Screenwipe on the BBC talking about the show, and he's similarly unhinged, and if I were him, I'd just stick to writing exceptional television. However, most criticism of PJ seemed to stem from their unprofessionalism when it came to storing evidence and attracting predators. As seen in a video, which I've done on this channel, which you should watch, either now or after this video, the show and PJ did not engage in anything that could be considered entrapment, but they were often seen to be leading the predators on, and once a predator was on the hook, they'd do everything they could to keep them on it. Perverted Justice was known to have somewhat dodgy records, to the point where people such as generic white male were forced to have their cases dropped because PJ allegedly lost all the logs from the sting in a data crash. Allegedly, this was not a crash, and allegedly, PJ just didn't want to hand over the files to the police. Who's to say what really happened, eh? My lawyers are very adamant that I can't. Yet another reason for controversy around the show would be that they were both airing the predators out to the public and were also directly responsible for the arrest of these reprobates. Oh, and also TCAP were paying PJ nearly $1 million a year towards the end of the show, but I'm sure that had nothing to do with anything. The penultimate big reason why the show was cancelled was because predators started thinking with their actual heads for the most part, and the show was attracting very few of them towards the end. 7 predators, down from 21 previously, turned up for the final sting, which was filmed over a 3-day period, and Chris's prediction from Conan eventually came true.
Conan, I had no idea when we started that this would still be going on 2.5 years later. I mean, I thought we'd do it once or twice, and we'd get to the point where, you know, we'd have video of me pacing in a kitchen, you know, like the Maytag repairman. With nothing to do,
because no one's showing up, right.
And the final major reason for the cancellation of this brilliant show would be the suicide of Lewis Conrad. I've talked about this before in a video, which you can watch right here. But essentially, Lewis Conrad was caught chatting to a decoy, found out, then killed himself. Then his sister sued for $105 million. Obviously, this put a lot of pressure on NBC to cancel the show, especially with the lawsuit being allowed to move forward rather than being immediately dismissed. So to conclude, the show was cancelled for essentially 5 big reasons. Chris Hansen and the network thought that the content was evergreen and thus no more of it needed to be filmed, with Hansen ready to move on from the show. With all the equipment that was needed to make the show's filming a reality, along with other costs associated with the show, it wasn't financially smart to do another season when combined with other factors. One such factor is that predators were starting to fail to turn up, with the show seeing a dramatic decline in the last investigation, giving an indication that maybe predators were wising up to the show. Another reason for the show's cancellation would be that controversy surrounded the show for years and since its inception, and perhaps the higher-ups at NBC were tired of the show as members of their own network refused to work on the show for ethical reasons. Finally, and probably most significantly, the fallout that came from the suicide of Lewis Conrad. A $105 million lawsuit, a police department under heavy fire, and all the predators walking free. Botched from the start to the finish, this may not have been the only reason for the end of the show, but it certainly was extremely significant. So today we're going to be going through common misconceptions about the show and discussing why they aren't true. These 6 misconceptions that we're going to be talking about in the video today have been chosen from what I've seen from the Lorne Armstrong and Lewis Conrad videos on my channel. Don't forget to watch them once you finish watching this video. So just know that people really do believe these. If you're ever shocked or think, hey, nobody really believes that, that's got to be a lie. Number 1. To catch a predator is entrapment. If I get my reading glasses out here and we take a gander, then we can see that the legal definition of entrapment is essentially government agents may not originate a criminal design, implant in an innocent person's minds the disposition to commit a criminal act, and then induce commission of the crime so that the government may prosecute. There are more nuances to it, as there are with every crime in criminal defence, but to stop this video getting too boring too quickly, this is what we're going to be focusing on. According to justice.gov, there are 2 major things required: government inducement of the crime, and a defendant's lack of predisposition to engage in criminal conduct. Essentially, the government can't trick you into doing a crime without you originally wanting to do it and then prosecute you. However, without one of these, the entrapment defence fails. Therefore, because perverted justice never initiated contact with a predator, at least on the show, they can immediately start to dismantle the defence. Of course, just saying hello to somebody doesn't automatically equate to proof of concept of crime, but given that the decoys always made sure that the predators knew their ages, always made sure to not be the ones to explicitly bring up anything illegal, and that they never contacted the predators first, make it very clear that the predators weren't induced into soliciting a minor. Also, perverted justice weren't government agents. Number 2. Chris Hansen is a predator. What? This is probably the most baffling misconception. It seems to stem from him being arrested in 2021 in tandem with him cheating on his wife with an intern in 2011. Man, he must really hate the years ending in 1. So in 2011, Chris Hansen, at the age of 52, was caught by the Inquirer cheating on his wife with a 30-year-old. People seem to have mistaken the age as 13, probably because of his association with To Catch a Predator, but no, Chris Hansen isn't a predator, or at least not a confirmed one. Also in 2021 he was arrested because he handed himself in for missing a court date. He's not a predator. Number 3. Most TCAP cases are dismissed. This one is a lot harder to prove, as PJ once tried to claim that they held a 99% conviction rate, which, unsurprisingly, wasn't even remotely true. Amazingly, somebody has worked out the actual real rate though. This absolute mad lad on the Temple of TCAP sat there and figured out how many cases were successful, finding out that the conviction rate of TCAP predators was 95.79% when you disclude Murphy, and if you include it, you know, the investigation where all of the predators' cases were thrown out because of the death of Lewis Conrad. By the way, watch my video about that. It was an 88.36% conviction rate. So, thanks to the fat decoy, we're very clearly able to see that most to catch a predator cases ended in convictions. So they must have done something at least a little bit right. Number 4. No crime has been committed because there was no kid. I reckon this is the stupidest possible misconception that we have or will talk about today. Let's say somebody tries to murder you. Yes, you watching at home. They try and come into your house and they succeed. They grab a knife, they walk up the stairs, and they stab your bed where they think that you're lying, except they've accidentally stabbed the body pillow double that you laid to fool them. How would you feel if they still had the intent to murder you, but were let off because they didn't actually hurt anybody? There is no way any of these men can be innocent. They had the necessary mens rea and actus rea to constitute a crime. They are criminals. End of story. Doesn't matter that there was no child. You categorically cannot let somebody who has committed a crime of this severity to immediately walk the streets of society again, just so that they can go and attempt this again. That would be ridiculous. Number 5. PJ sent CP to the predators. The final misconception is a quite frankly outrageous claim, but I can see why people would believe this. However, this is categorically untrue. Perverted justice would barely send anything even considered racy to the predators, to the point where at times it very nearly cost them getting predators. And this is because, thankfully, and somewhat surprisingly given how many predators are in government, but this would be illegal in every state at every level, pretty much anywhere in the world. Possessing it, sending it, making it, pretty much everything except destroying it is illegal, thankfully. So no one would do this then, now, or ever. It should never happen, and never did happen under PJ's watch. I mean, it's a good thing that this is the case, otherwise Chris would have had to have, started an episode with Xavier von Erck sat in front of him and just gone, so, would you mind telling me where you got all of this CP?
Don't mess with Murphy.
That was the case when a decoy from Perverted Justice started getting messages from a man who we learned was an assistant district attorney from a nearby county.
He was the Kaufman County, Texas, district attorney for more than 2 decades.
56-year-old Louis William Conrad Jr., screen name InExcess00, chatted graphically about sex with a Perverted Justice volunteer pretending to be a 13-year-old boy.
Those pictures that you sent, those were pretty hot.
Oh, did you like them?
Yeah, I sure did.
The prosecutor pretends to be a 19-year-old college student, sending these pictures of a young man who looks like a model.
You're hot and in college. You can get all the guys you want. Why me?
To me, you're hot.
Why?
I like younger.
Really? Like for boyfriend or just sex?
Both.
Is that your
Yes.
It looks huge.
Please don't trade it, Luke, okay?
No, I swear.
In his chat with the Perverted Justice decoy, he talked about wanting to watch the boy masturbate and holding each other and feeling all over. He sent pornographic pictures.
And what do you want to do?
Whatever you'd like to do.
You tell me. Kiss.
But for some reason, Conrad abruptly stopped chatting. As we mentioned earlier, because the prosecutor doesn't live in Murphy, Chief Myrick has turned over the job of arresting him to local police in Conrad's hometown of Terrell. Then we hear a faint crack as the officers force their way in.
As they made entry, they confronted the suspect. I believe he was in the hallway, and he told them he wasn't going to hurt them, and then shot himself in the head.
He is then airlifted to Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, where he later dies.
How did you feel when you found out that he died?
I don't feel responsible for it. I sleep well at night.
Don't mess with Murphy.
Lewis Conrad, former Kaufman County District Attorney, is the man often credited with ending TCAP as a show and setting 24 suspected predators free due to his suicide on Bonfire Night 2006. His chat log is publicly available, filed under other resolutions on the Perverted Justice website, but what a lot of people don't know is that he wasn't the first predator to die because of TCAP. Charles Harding and James Wiles both stopped taking medication that directly led to their deaths whilst waiting for trial after being arrested during a TCAP sting operation. This all leads to one question which we have to ask. What was so different about Lewis Conrad's death that meant that it garnered all of this controversy? The best way to investigate this would be to dive into his personal history and see if that had any effect on the outrage.
He was inextricably linked to Dateline NBC's To Catch a Predator.
Lewis William Conrad Jr. was born on the 30th of January 1950 in Terrell, Texas, the same town where he would meet his demise. A small town in Kaufman County, Conrad would dedicate almost his entire working life for the county, serving as its district attorney for 20 years after graduating from the Texas Tech University of Law, 400 miles away. According to Esquire, this was a man that was known to his peers as a man likely to succeed. So much so that he was voted most likely to succeed by the high school class that he was president of. The only memory some of his peers have of him, where he wasn't a so proper, so predictable man, was when he had to be wheeled home in a wheelbarrow from a party where Jamie Foxx, yes, that Jamie Foxx, was the entertainment. After leaving his position as Kaufman County District Attorney to make a failed run to become the 86th State District Judge, he became the Chief Felony Assistant District Attorney for Rockwell County, a county directly bordering the north of Kaufman County, just 30 minutes away by car. It would be fair to assume that he had a close relationship with the police, given that he was an attorney, but also because during his arrest, they mentioned that the policeman who knocked on his door was a sergeant who has known Conrad for 20 years. Given this background, now would be a great time to delve into the actual investigation and see if it had any effect on the incident or not.
The town's police chief announced he was declaring war on sexual predators.
He said this will put the city of Murphy on the map.
Contrary to a lot of people's thoughts, the Murphy, Texas TCAP investigation was the show's 9th. After this, there would be 3 more investigations, namely Flagler Beach, Florida, Ocean County, New Jersey, and Bowling Green, Kentucky. 25 men in total were caught in this sting, with 5 of them being dead at this current moment in time. Those being Stanley Kendall, Twink Toilet, Timothy Knowles, Timothy Gilliam, and of course the man we are currently discussing, Lewis Conrad. Before the investigation even started, there was significant pushback from authority figures in Texas. They did not want Dateline there. It seems mostly because they wanted full control over the investigations and not having Dateline commanding the police, which, according to certain people, is what ended up happening. The DA's office was so against this operation that they sent a letter to Chief Myrick, who we will discuss very soon, saying, "We are in the law enforcement business, not show business." Dateline also received significant pushback from the local community in Murphy, to the point of locals protesting outside of the Sting House because they thought the operation would draw more predators to Murphy. Which is really down to personal opinion. I couldn't find arrest numbers to prove anything, but this seems like a highly unlikely outcome. If people know about a sting operation in a certain place, surely they would be more likely to stay as far away from that place that they know has law enforcement that is equipped to deal with their certain crime. Although in all fairness, I can see how letting 24 sexual predators walk free would lead to some people feeling more empowered and think that they are more likely to get away with it, but that's just my opinion. Detective Patterson, an off-duty detective TCAP had hired as protection, was noted for spotting several mistakes made in the arrests, such as potential crossfire situations and the overly intense takedowns for the situation. Apart from all this, the investigation was pretty normal, but to me, the one thing that makes the investigation stand out above all, apart from the Lewis Conrad situation, is Chief Billy Myrick.
Murphy Police Chief Billy Myrick explains.
Billy R. Myrick is the son of the apparently famous guitarist and policeman Billy Myrick. At the time of the sting, he had been chief in Murphy for 1.5 years and had never previously been a chief anywhere else. According to the Esquire article, Tonight on Dateline, This Man Will Die, Myrick was described as a good officer but not a great leader, with most people that were interviewed in his background check coming to the consensus that he should be nowhere near such a position of power. These claims would be seemingly vindicated years after the TCAP operation, as in 2014, this time as chief in Eastland, Texas, Myrick and his department fumbled an investigation into Clayton Lee Ford, who would then go on and commit further crimes, which led him to plead guilty to aggravated sexual assault of a child, attempted capital murder, and 2 counts of indecency with a child by contact. This man seems incapable of arresting nonces without making sure they walk free. By the way, if you're wondering, the reason that Myrick was in charge in Eastland and not Murphy is because he was fired by the new city manager in 2008 after locals kept demanding that he was sacked for the TCAP sting. If you still think that sacking the man is a bit harsh, there is one more concerning story from this sting that really makes you question why this man was ever allowed near a position of police power. Shortly before the sting, Dateline, Perverted Justice, and the Murphy PD ran a proof of concept sting where, Esquire alleges, that Myrick seized the SUV the predator drove to the house and from then on used the vehicle as his own personal automobile. The man was woefully inept wherever he went, which is made even clearer by the actual day of the incident.
There's one more day left in our undercover operation, and perverted justice decoys are still in chat rooms.
Right, time to talk about the fucking shit show. The day started with Chief Myrick demanding that Detective Walter Weiss, known as Gator, immediately get both a search warrant and an arrest warrant for Lewis Conrad. Dateline are alleged to have wanted this warrant immediately because they had tickets to fly out in the afternoon. Dateline NBC and Perverted Justice would camp outside of the house from the early morning, planning to interview him if he left the house to go to church or to the shops or anything like that. However, Dateline and Perverted Justice were not exactly discreet in their stakeout, allegedly bringing both a catering truck and a DJ. There was absolutely no need for a bloody disc jockey, and possibly helped to tip off Lewis Conrad that he was probably wanted by To Catch a Predator. This theory would be contested by those involved with the show, saying in the narration that since Conrad never came to the house, there is nothing to suggest that he knew Dateline was involved. After a while, Myrick decided to get the Terrell police involved, as it was taking place in their area rather than Murphy. They would send a police sergeant, who had been a friend of Conrad for over 2 decades, to knock on the door and try to coax Lewis out peacefully. He was obviously unsuccessful. The police could see that somebody was in the house because the TV and laptop were on, so someone camped out near a window, ostensibly to go in if Conrad motioned to the computer out of fear of the destruction of evidence. The police were then notified by, let's just say, non-police members of the investigation that they had Lewis Conrad's number, something that they had not tried earlier. They called it, but received no response and would not try again. After getting no response for a while, they got word that the search warrant had been signed, in addition to the arrest warrant that was signed earlier. And around this time, the decision was made to call a tactical team to force an entry and get Conrad out. Around 45 minutes after they were called, the tactical team arrived on the scene and determined that a sliding glass door would be the best place for entry into the house. A faint crack could be heard from outside the house, and no one else would hear anything until Lieutenant Barber came out to Chris Hansen to tell him that Conrad had killed himself.
And Lieutenant Adana Barber of the Murphy Police Department comes out and tells us what happened.
As they made entry, they confronted the suspect. I believe he was in the hallway, and he told them he wasn't going to hurt them, and then shot himself in the head.
And he had a pistol in his hand.
Small caliber.
An ambulance would be called as the police tried to stem the bleeding, but as Conrad was being carted past Chris Hansen, it became very clear that he would most likely not make it. He was airlifted away, but was later pronounced dead at the Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas. Elsewhere, police pulled over and arrested part of NBC security, an off-duty police officer, Detective Patterson. This was a case of mistaken identity, as they thought he was a perp, and they were apologetic about the mistake. Also, Edward Hollingsworth V, aka Twink Toilet, was arrested on the Sting House front yard by police after Decoy Dan locked him out of the inside of the house. Chris Hansen would determine what version of events transpired and tell the news crew, well, I mean, there's gonna be some controversy.
Don't mess with Murphy.
Decoy Dan allegedly felt terrible and guilty after the death of Lewis Conrad, and could go on to explain the reason for him not mentioning TCAP in any of his work in the modern day. Apparently he never really liked TCAP, it just provided him with $5,000 every time he did it. Gator, the officer who wrote the warrants, would leave law enforcement entirely and never return due to his frustration about how things were handled, being forced to write the warrant after being denied sleep for 26 hours and being told, "You work for Dateline now." He would appear on the 2020 investigation into this incident. Perverted Justice founder Xavier von Erck would go on to say that his only regret would be that Conrad died before he was able to face justice, a sentiment echoed by the website to this day. He would justify the actions taken that day by saying that Conrad abruptly stopped chatting and was destroying evidence, evidenced by him deleting his MySpace page. However, von Erck would also email Esquire and say that the MySpace page was still up, and then say that that MySpace page was discovered after the operation. According to the Columbia Journalism Review, Chris Hansen's first reaction was to cover the story for NBC, which he did, appearing on the Today Show to fill the public in on exactly what happened. Hansen would deny any responsibility in Conrad's death, and insists to multiple outlets that he sleeps well at night. However, he has expressed that he never wants to see this, though the following claim is intensely disputed. Chris maintains that Conrad had pornographic images of children on his computer, for which he could have faced up to 100 years in prison for. The DA's office declined to prosecute any of the predators caught. Whilst it seems to some that they were angry that one of their own was caught in the sting, the DA's office offers some rather ironclad reasoning for the decision. One reason was that it was almost impossible to prove for 16 of the men arrested that either they or the decoy were actually in the jurisdiction of the DA's office when the crime was actually committed, which is a requirement under Texas law. Another reason was that, allegedly, all of the arrests made were technically illegal, as almost all of the predators had been arrested without any prior investigation into the crimes that these predators may or may not have committed. Billy Myrick essentially tried to brush off the events of the day, focusing on the predators that he had caught that were still alive. After being bombarded with pleas for him to resign, he stayed in the post until he was fired in 2008. During this time, he was routinely asked whether he had taken orders from Dateline and Perverted Justice, thus allowing them to act as the de facto leaders of the operation, when it was purported to many officials that the police would be firmly in charge. Myrick vehemently denied these allegations, but footage from the scenes seemed to paint a much different story, with Dateline being described as surveillance and Hansen and Frank providing information to the police that they were not in possession of. ABC, about a year on from the incident, would run a 20/20 about this specific incident, which ruthlessly ripped into the show, the police involved, and attempted to portray Lewis Conrad as a sympathetic figure. Esquire would delve into the day as much as possible and, like ABC, would try as hard as possible to make Lewis Conrad seem like a victim rather than a criminal. They would concede that it was immoral for Lewis Conrad to chat like this, but also said words to the effect of, "He did not go to the sting house, therefore the police actions were not justified." Conrad's sister, Patricia, as well as attempting to sue NBC for $100 million, said, "I will never consider my brother's death a suicide. It was an act precipitated by the rush to grab headlines where there was no evidence that there was any emergency other than to line the pockets of an out-of-control group and a TV show pressed for ratings and a deadline. When these people came after him for a news show, it ended his life."
We got another predator off the streets.
There is an abundance of reasons that TCAP was cancelled. Rising costs, falling predator numbers, criticism of paying Perverted Justice, but the suicide of Lewis Conrad was ultimately the biggest reason. The show would ultimately run for just one more year, having 3 investigations shown in 5 segments. It is very debatable whether or not the show would have continued had Lewis Conrad been taken alive, but in my opinion, I still think the show would have been cancelled, but a fair bit later. Listening to Hansen speak, it is clear that he wanted to do more, but not forever, and NBC realised that the show was timeless, so there was definitely a ticking clock on the show. Conrad just set the cancellation forward by a large amount of time. It's not like the show would have been free from controversy either way, but there is absolutely no debate that Lewis Conrad helped to end TCAP.
What was today's lesson supposed to be?
Overall, I believe that the reason there was such a fuss about this one person's death was due to a combination of factors. His deep ties to a place that was hostile from the beginning meant that the investigation into him was always going to be difficult. TCAP had started coming under fire for the ethical reasons, and an ever-increasing amount of scrutiny was being placed on Dateline and perverted justice. The absolute shit show of a police process that was fast-tracked and badly done meant that there was more fuel to add to the fire that would be lit if anything went wrong, and it went wrong. The ever-present debate about whether Dateline was reporting the news or manufacturing it. All of these factors meant that Lewis Conrad's death was a major issue for many people. He was almost certainly guilty of the crimes that he was accused of, but never stood trial, so the full extent of the evidence will almost certainly never be widely known. Lewis Conrad killed himself on Bonfire Night 2006, but in doing so, he also killed the show that pushed him over the edge.
Okay, his name is Lorne, L-O-R, and he...
Why don't you answer that goddamn phone? You haven't answered that phone until you called me earlier tonight.
It's funny, because I'd like to see him come to my house and try that shit.
Is there any way that I can talk to her?
You either have...
Took you long enough to be able to fucking get that voicemail to me, though, didn't it? No, I need the whole fucking story. I will tell you the whole fucking story.
Lorne is an icon in the TCAP community. Take, for example, the Church of Cod, where fellow Lornographers gather and meme the fuck out of Lorne and other predators.
I am going to do something about them people in the fucking forum and all that stupid-ass Church of Cod crap.
What is your full name? Lorne Armstrong.
Hello everybody, and welcome to this deep dive video into the strange world of Lorne Armstrong. Please keep in mind this is supposed to be an introductory video for those that don't know much / anything about Lorne or the Church of Cod. I am not an expert Lorneographer. I don't claim to be, not by any means. I just have a passing fascination with this man and TCAP in general and his actions. I want to share it with people who maybe don't know much about him and poke a bit of fun and also just have a nice little analysis. So, first of all, I should probably actually explain who he is. Lorne Armstrong is a complete and total piece of shit. Thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, please. Lorne Armstrong is a terrible person, most famous for his arrest on Dateline NBC's To Catch a Predator. He is one of the most talked about and mocked predators in the entire history of the show, and even has his own mock religion called the Church of Cod. So I think now is a good time to go and have a look at the final episode of To Catch a Predator, which was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and aired in late 2007. The investigation in which Lorne was caught was the final ever episode of TCAP, taking place in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and airing on the 28th of December 2007. Only 7 men were caught in the TCAP portion of the sting. It was the only investigation that was not organised by Perverted Justice or Dateline, but was instead instigated by the Kentucky Bureau of Investigation. The lack of predators, the suicide in the previous episode, including the destruction of the cases against all of the predators caught in Murphy, Texas, and the ensuing $100 million lawsuit from Lewis Conrad's sister, and how expensive the show was to film, all meant that this was the last investigation that Dateline did. Because of this all meant that Lorne was one of the last great predators to watch, along with Dustin McFetridge and, to a lesser extent admittedly, Michael Joseph Patterson. Given all of this, let's have a look at Lorne Armstrong. To Catch a Predator was not Lorne's only dalliance with the law, as the man has a rather interesting history between him and justice. In 2006, he was arrested for a DUI when he drove into a house whilst drunk, attempting to downplay the incident by saying that he was a few sips over the limit and stating that the reason for him driving was because he didn't want his brothers walking home. Him not taking responsibility for his actions will become a running theme throughout Lorne's life. According to the alleged incident report that was found by Madame Ovaries at the Temple of Teacap, the car, which belonged to his potentially flew 15 feet in the air before hitting the house, which doesn't exactly look like it could withstand the full force of a car hitting it if this is the actual house. Also, allegedly, nobody was wearing seatbelts and one of his brothers was in the back of the truck at the time, so he nearly got several people killed via his drunk driving. To counter this though, it must be said that the report's authenticity has been disputed, thus this may not be 100% accurate as to what happened in the incident, but what we do know for certain is that he was arrested for a DUI pre-Dateline. However, this is not Lorne's only pre-TCAP crime, as he has openly admitted that he had swindled 30 grand, yes, 30,000 US dollars from an elderly couple for renovation work that was never completed. You know, there used to be a show on British TV for people like this.
No, it doesn't. I don't really give a monkeys about other people and their kids. I just take their money and run.
And he has paid back, at the time of his last YouTube video, less than $100. Just, you know, $29,900 short of what he swindled them out of. A thief as well as a Nancy drunk driver. Whatever could be next. Fortunately, he committed no more crimes pre-Dateline, so that's going to be it for his pre-TCAP crimes. So let's talk about his confrontation with the pedo slayer, Chris Hansen. So Lorne's interview with Chris is very interesting. Just as a bit of background, Lorne was invited by Kayla, the decoy, and he kept demanding throughout the entire time that he was there that she give him a kiss. If you want to watch the uncut interview, I will leave a link in the description.
Seem pretty comfortable there.
Hey, sir.
How are you?
All right, how are you doing?
What's happening?
Not too much.
Not too much?
I absolutely adore the fact that Lorne's face drops like a lead balloon at a birthday party when Chris Hansen walks in.
So what are you up to tonight?
Not a whole lot.
By the way, I absolutely love that this has become a meme.
You want to explain yourself?
Not really. I never really was going to do anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you wrote the full-size D.H. Lawrence novel to say let's be friends. Lorne clearly knows her age.
It's supposed to be 13.
And knows that it's wrong.
37.
So him not taking any responsibility whatsoever is completely infuriating.
You tell her to delete her archives.
I didn't want her to get in trouble by her parents.
You can see in his face that he thinks that this is genuinely a good response because he thinks that he's showing that he cares for the decoy, whilst also just conveniently protecting himself. We see through your bullshit, Lorne.
What do you think ought to happen to you?
I think I should go to counseling to get off the internet.
In this instance, I would like to speak directly to Lorne Armstrong here. Genuinely. And I mean this from the coldest, dankest, nastiest piece of my heart. Fuck you, Lorne. Taking advantage of a person that you believe to be 13 years of age is a perverse and horrendous crime. I know that he probably said this to attempt to gain some sympathy and try to weasel his way out of trouble, but it is immensely infuriating, especially since, to this day, Lorne has, does, and will continue to deny taking any responsibility for his actions or admitting any guilt. I'm not usually one for long prison sentences, but yours was a joke. This may be a bit off topic, but predators like Lorne, by which I mean true groomers that spent countless hours attempting to manipulate a defenseless child for his own twisted and depraved pleasure and sexual fulfillment, deserve to be locked up for a long time, not the paltry, weak, insultingly short sentence that you were handed. If, and thanks to TCAP it was only an if, a 13-year-old child had actually been the victim, they would have definitely remembered that encounter for the rest of their entire life. So why shouldn't the punishment be at least partly reflective of that?
Your story on
He said it! He said it! I just want to make this point because I want to make it very clear that throughout this video, there may be bits where I may be seen as sort of defensive towards Lorne, especially when we get to the Ramona tapes. but I just want to make sure what he did here was vile, and he absolutely deserved his prison sentence. So that was the interview that was on TCAP. Like I said earlier, before my rant, I will leave a link in the description if you want to watch both the TCAP interview with Lorne and also the uncut Chris Hansen interview with Lorne. I need to find a good way to segue into his chat log now. Referred to as the Holy Lornography by the Church of God, Lorne had a, and I'm not joking, 407-page chat log between him and the decoy. This is an absolutely ludicrous size, with it being about the same size as a phone book. Just take a moment to process that. This grown man had a chat with a year 8/7th grader that was over twice as big as the script for the first Lord of the Rings film. Given that in films, one page is approximately 1 minute when it comes to a script, this chat log would be 6.7 hours. That's about the same time as all of the Star Wars prequels without the credits. You could drive from London to Newcastle and then put on Kung Fu Panda and still have time left. 407 pages is a ridiculous amount, is what I'm trying to get at. If you want to have it read to you, then Threat Level Midnight has made a reading of it, and I'll link off to the playlist in the description if you want to watch it. Just a heads up, it is well over 12 hours long, so I would recommend saving the address and maybe putting it on during a long flight or something. Now, is this chat the worst chat log in the history of TCAP or Prefer to Justice? No. Is it even close? Not at all. Is it absolutely supremely hilarious? Absolutely. And with all the talk of Mr. Penis meeting Miss Vagina, it is muy bueno. What wasn't hilarious was his interview with the police. Like almost everybody else that appeared on TCAP, Lorne has an interview with the police that can be watched on YouTube. I'll leave a link. But it's quite boring to watch. And Vince Nicotra, I thought you were in jail. Wait, no, you can't clop up. You can't. During the interview, Lorne mostly just cries and then admits to what the cops are asking him to admit to. And then, after he's admitted to pretty much everything, only then does the absolutely Einstein brain ask for an attorney. I would personally recommend against wasting your time watching the interview, but if you truly care to watch 20 minutes of sobbing and useless information, I'll leave a link to the description. But like I said, personally, I'd rather keep those 20 minutes of my life and do something useful with them. After being caught by the bastards in blue, Lorne was charged with interstate travel with the intent of sex with a minor, attempted sexual contact with a minor, and attempting to produce child pornography because they found a camera in his car. For these 3 felonies, Lorne received a combined sentence for a whopping 7 years in prison. Placed on probation for life, which doesn't particularly matter because he's broken it so many times without going to jail, and a lifetime registration as a sex offender. During the case, Lorne tried to get the bracelet thrown out as evidence because, and I'm directly quoting him here, it's crap. But obviously that did not work. On the rather sound advice of his attorney, he pleaded guilty, but would later claim, in an appeal at court, whilst trying to get his sentence overturned, that due to perceived poor counsel, his conviction should be overturned. He was unsuccessful there as well. Whilst in prison, Lorne wrote a book called Taken Abroad.
Lorne actually wrote a book in prison. The name of the book is Taken Abroad. It's $25, and if you...
And was met by mixed reception. Overall, the book, which I am not going to pay any money for, and I'm definitely not reading, seems to be a way for Lorne to express his sick fantasies about banging a child, and he does not have a good grasp about what war and PTSD does to a person. Now let's go from something he made that I can't view to something he made that I can view. After his release from prison, Lorne started a YouTube channel. The channel started off as mostly Lorne singing some songs, some original, some already established. A fun fact, Lorne believes that he could be a professional singer, apparently based on the reaction he gets when he's singing karaoke, but I shall let you decide whether that is the case or not. None of his videos have more likes than dislikes, which is surprising to me because I thought the internet loved sexual predators. Lorne eventually transitioned his content from singing to a personal vlogging and cooking channel. He's even listed as a cooking, vlogging and singing YouTuber on Wikituber, all whilst being unable to find a camera that wasn't a potato with a hole in it. His personal videos are... they're something else, man. Like, it seems to show that he blames his siblings for what happened on TCAP because... and I really wish I was joking. Partly because they didn't give him deviled eggs and mac and cheese.
I never saw the meatballs, I never saw the deviled eggs, and I never saw the macaroni and cheese.
However, there was a supposed hidden influence on his channel, something that would lead to the first TCAP schism, one of only 2 to date, the other being Chris Hansen and Vincent Lecontria, who, fun fact, is now in prison, going on a copyright spree in the community deciding which one of those 2 was to blame. But the hidden influence would turn out to be the woman known only as Ramona. During some point in 2017, whilst his YouTube channel was still active, Lorne was approached by a person pretending to be a black woman called Ramona. This was a catfisher who caused the first TCAP schism. Many in the community were against catfishing the man and hunting him down. The other side claimed he deserved it. Some people even turned up to his house. Lorne claims that he knew he was being catfished the entire time, but that is not believed by large swathes of the community and would not particularly align with his actions nor his words. Here is a thread discussing the topic that I will leave a link to in the description. Now, this catfishing is extremely complicated due to YouTube taking down most of the calls for privacy reasons and most of the community going to war about what happened, who was in the right, and where to go from that point. What I can say for certain is that there are still portions of calls with Lorne Armstrong on YouTube that reveal a great deal about him as a person and his thought process in general. Take this video for example, where Lorne denies that he was going to the Sting house for sex and insists that Dateline NBC were responsible for luring him there.
I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to have sex with her.
But why did you even go over there, sex or otherwise? Why?
I don't know, because I didn't want to go there. And on the way there, I wanted to turn around.
Or this video, where he gets extremely possessive over Ramona because she has a guy friend. Also, Ember Infierno and Sam Pendleton were brought in to help Ramona, and that caused a bit of controversy in itself. Ember, from what I can tell, is not well liked in the TCAP community, and it seems, again, not an expert on this subject, to stem from her trying to sabotage any catfish attempts on Lorne, not because of the kindness of her heart, but more to have sole control over him doxing people and manipulating Lorne into filing false police claims against people that she does not like or agree with, or that she perceives as a threat. There is a whole lot more out there if you want to search for it, but most calls are terrible quality, surprisingly on Lorne's end, and are all really long and keep getting taken down. All these videos will be linked in the description to give you a bit more of a taste, but there's so much footage out there, but it's all jumbled up, hard to look for, and you kind of had to be there for quite a bit of it. There's some stuff on the Temple of TCAP as well, so I'll leave as much as I can in the description. Lorne was arrested and sent to Piscataquis County Jail in August 2019 after failing to complete his sex offender rehabilitation class because he refused to take any responsibility for his actions and violating his probation by appearing at the class drunk at least 5 times from 2014 to 2019. More info can be found on this Reddit post by For Better or Worse. I'll leave a link, as with anything of interest, within this video. Funnily enough, one of the first things that Lorne did after his release from prison involved a court. Remember earlier when I said that Lorne complained about his public defender? Well, that was connected to a $40 million lawsuit for deprivation of rights, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligence. The part about the deprivation of rights, aka Lorne's 42 USC section 1983 claims, were immediately dismissed, but everything else was allowed to move forwards. He claims that he was lured to the Sting house and that he initially refused but was pestered into accepting the invitation, therefore it wasn't his fault. Everybody say it with me now. Lorne was unsuccessful in his claim. He has a public registered sex offender profile with some information on it that could be seen as too much information or not. Again, this is your choice. And to anybody claiming that I'm violating his privacy, this is literally the second result that you get when you Google his name. So in the end, what did we learn? Lorne is an interesting character that probably deserved his stint in prison, and quite possibly a lot more. He is a delusional, Nancy prick who tried to solicit sex from a 13-year-old girl who was defenseless against his manipulation, but also potentially a victim, not from Dateline NBC like he ridiculously claims, but from regular people in the TCAP community, some of which had turned up to his house. However, you could believe that his 407-page chat log, his very serious crime, his irresponsibility, his homophobia, and his sexism could all be seen as justification for what's happened to him. Overall, this all could have been avoided if he'd have just spent his birthday blowing out candles instead of trying to marry a 13-year-old child. And that was an introduction to Lorne Armstrong. Thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. I know this is a little different to, well actually I suppose it's very different to the content that I usually release, but I enjoyed making it, I enjoyed researching it. I hope you enjoyed it or not. Like I said, I'm not an expert lornographer, so some of this stuff could be false. I may have misrepresented some things. If so, I do sincerely apologise. That was not my intention. But I want to give a special thank you to these websites and people. The TCAP wiki page, a lot of the information came from there. Bam Books A Million, they're the people that were supplying all of the reviews for Lorne Armstrong's Taken Abroad. The Temple of TCAP, fantastic website, so many beautiful things on there. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank Madam Overy's on there. Lorne vs NBC, whoever put together the summation document that's online rather than the big legal case that I would have had to read otherwise. Thank you for that. For Better or Worse on Reddit, very useful. Wikitubia and Boston Cap, who has done a very comprehensive timeline on the Temple of TCAP. Highly recommend you go and watch it. But yeah, like I said, thank you all for watching. I want to do some other stuff on this topic. I'm not going to turn into a TCAP channel, but I am fascinated by some of the things that happened. I only have one other video in mind, and that's surrounding Lewis Conrad and the end of TCAP, which I thought could be very interesting to cover, especially after hearing some of the stories. But that's going to be it. Thank you.